Thanks everyone for joining us for an episode of SpeakEasy with Eric and Cory. This is episode 1. It's the maiden voyage. I'd really like to give you guys a little bit of a background on who Cory and myself are and maybe what we're about and why you should listen to us. Why are we interesting for you to tune in? So let's start with some stuff I already know about you, but obviously they don't. Let's go into some background info and I don't know, tell them, where does Cory come from? Where were you born? And just give us a little bit of background on the early years.
Sure, yeah. So I was born and raised in Southern California, Riverside County. Even this is where we're based. So born and raised here, and I grew up in one of those families where you spend a lot of time outside, ride your bike, and play with your friends until the street lamps come on, and that's when that's your curfew. So that was cool growing up that way in a rural area and being able to play with my friends and ride my bike and be outside.
Not common really anymore. I mean, even we have kids.
My
right?
own kids, yeah.
and that's not a thing. And
Yep.
But more importantly, Dodgers, Padres, Angels.
I'm not a huge sports guy. I mean, I'll definitely watch the World Series, the Super Bowl, things like that. But I like racing. I'm into automotive sports, but probably not even really watching them necessarily on TV. I like being there, just like anybody would say they'd prefer to be at a sporting event than watch it on TV. That's kind of where I'm at with anything.
And mom and dad, what do they do for work? Did that influence you?
Yeah, my dad drove a truck my whole life. Basically, he started out being a roofer and then drove a truck. So construction oriented, worked with his hands, and then did so even when he was driving truck at home. So like we were a very construction or automotive focused family. All of our vehicles were older and we worked on them. If something broke, dad fixed it. And so I was very involved in home projects, automotive projects, things like that. Mom stayed home and took care of me and my 3 siblings. So yeah, that was our dynamic.
And school, I guess, what kind of student were you, right? Like, so there's a lot of emphasis on, I've got a daughter that's reaching high school and all the questions are coming up, right? How much does school matter? If does my grades finally start to matter to the point where they impact what kind of career I have? So how did you approach high school and school beyond that? What was your mentality? What kind of student were you?
So, my parents didn't go get higher education. My parents were really open about, hey, do what you want to do. We'll support you. But they were school focused. They were working with us on making sure that we were doing our homework and we were doing okay in school and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say I got bad grades, but school wasn't my focus. I went through the motions and, in high school, the portion of school, I guess, that everybody refers back to. My senior year, I had 3 periods of auto shop, 2 periods off, and then I had English and government. So I had 2 academic periods in high school. The rest was auto shop basically for my whole day. So if that tells you anything about my school focus.
Working on automobiles with dad and then having auto shop multiple times. Yeah, your path looked like it was pretty well paved. So
yeah, good grades though. I mean, I wouldn't say I was like a crappy student, just or decent grades. Just not focused on trying to be a lawyer.
And then what was the college? Did you have aspirations to go to college, or how did that work for you as you were exiting high school?
Well, when I was a kid, it was, you're supposed to go to college, right? But my dad was kind of forthcoming growing up. College wasn't for me. It's not for everybody. Figure out what you want to do. And I didn't feel like I knew what I wanted to be. So I did not go to college. I went to a trade school, automotive trade school, because I knew I was good at that. So I went to school to be an automotive technician.
Makes sense. And again, we could do a whole session just talking about the value of college. And I have these mini sessions with my teenager every night, and it's hard. It's hard to really know what's right for each individual person. So it sounds to me like you made the right choice. Like you had this path progressing and you ended up obviously going right into automotive. So it sounded like something that you were passionate about, you were skilled at, and it makes all the sense in the world why you wouldn't have gone to a 4-year college, gone into debt, and probably ended up regretting it and ending up in the same job anyway. So yeah, so go into that job. I mean, I guess you could summarize. You had probably a few jobs in the industry, but what was your path as you were navigating through after college into your various jobs?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, like with all the, the automotive focus growing up, automotive focus in high school, trade school, I excelled in understanding, how to work with my hands, how to work on cars. So in trade school, I got into a program. It's like an apprenticeship program with Mercedes-Benz. So I went through that and then got hired at what I would consider a pretty prestigious dealership in California, Southern California, to work for Mercedes-Benz. And so, that was my path. And it's an interesting place to work for a young kid. It's hard to get your expectations set so high, like when you're going to buy a vehicle. This isn't a plug for Mercedes-Benz, but like they take care of their customers and their nice vehicles. But there's a lot of tech, which is like, helps me, I think, later in life understanding things and where I am at now.
So everything in the life of Cory Johnson has progressed all the way to this day where you are a tech working for a great location, one that you speak very positively of you. How did you then pivot to solar? How do you make that hard turn? What's the main reason? There's probably a couple, but what convinced you that this turn was the correct one? Or is it the right one?
Well, I was working on cars in an interesting period of time. So like graduated from the trade school at the end of 2005. And in 2008, the world fell apart and people could barely afford their Mercedes-Benz, let alone like have a technician, do maintenance on it and stuff. So there wasn't a lot to do. And so I was trying to find something to do with my life. Ended up working for a race engine manufacturer in, close to where I lived. And during that time, I met my wife, my now wife, whose family was in solar. And I was very passionate about racing and automotive and all this stuff, but also interested in an area that was kind of a blank spot. Like growing up, my dad and my family, everybody in my family, we could do roofing. My dad could frame like plumbing, whatever, but electrical, we didn't really mess with. And I think most people are like, you get shocked if you touch that, so I'm going to stay away from it, right? I mean, people don't really mess with it if they don't know. So it was a blind spot for me. And working on cars, it's a completely different animal. It's not really, electrical is not going to hurt you, but in hindsight now, all the same principles apply. It's pretty easy to transition. But, my wife's parents, my now wife's parents were in solar. Interesting stuff for me. And so I decided to make the leap from racing to work in this weird solar field. Never, really put much thought into it. Had I even heard of it at the time? Probably not. Probably not at that time. This was 2011, 2012, something like that. And yeah, so I started working for New Day Solar around that time, and it's been a wild ride.
I mean, I think you say it because it's just your story, but when I hear it, it's pretty impressive to hear somebody that didn't go to college, right? So you weren't formally educated in really anything that you're currently doing. You went into a race automotive path through your trade school, obviously advanced through Mercedes-Benz to then working for a race engine shop, which I've been exposed to a little bit, that world, just through knowing you, and I have no idea why you left that world. It's way more interesting than the world we're in. I ask myself that often, like, what made you, I was genuinely interested in your answer of why you left. And even though I've heard the answer before, I still am curious to hear your varied response over time. But it's pretty incredible because obviously now, sitting in the seat you are one of the owners of New Day Solar. You're the contractor of New Day Solar, so now you're a licensed contractor. So to be able to do all of that without having gone to a traditional 4-year school and really weren't on a path to be doing what you're doing today, it's extremely impressive. And your transition into understanding the concepts that we have always impresses me, because you just talk about it like, oh yeah, it translates. Like this was easy for me to understand because solar was, I forget how you've it's like dumb electricity, basically. It's not as difficult as it is the other things that you've been exposed to. So I don't think you give yourself enough credit for that transition and how you got here. Well, I know a lot of solar people, and most people are very focused on, they have a solar path, right? And they got here because they've been doing it a long time. Yours is you might be the only person in the industry that came from a race engine background. If anybody else has, let us know, but you're probably the only one.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the electrical is, it's not overly complicated, but my whole life I've been interested in learning, and I'll attribute that to my dad. Like he was always like, gain as much knowledge as possible. Like, don't be afraid to learn something new. If somebody's speaking, listen, and have a takeaway. So I think that it was a new challenge. Like I'm happy to work with my hands, but working at Mercedes-Benz, the racing engine shop, amazing. I still talk to all the people that work there. I love all of them. But I was tired of doing it for a job, and I wanted to do it for a hobby, which is probably like really what the thing in the back of my mind that made me make the jump to like, let's go learn something new. This can turn into a hobby instead of a job.
Right. Yeah. To me, like what comes to mind when I think of someone like you, right? There's I don't know if you ever heard of this theory, not a theory, it's more of just something that somebody has said and observed, that people that get A's in school end up working for people that got C's. So the implication is the people that got C's in high school end up owning businesses, right? And the people who got A's work for them. And here's kind of the theory behind it, right? The people who are getting A's, they're very solely focused on academics, right? They're really good at that exact task. Whereas the people who got C's, they probably weren't as focused, and they were more diversified in their approach, right? They're better with interpersonal relations. They have better problem solving skills. Maybe they have more real world skills, like, not just in a book smarts, so street smarts, I guess you could say. So I think you fall right into that category where you're someone that, not that you got C's, I don't know if you did or didn't, but I think you're one of those people that like, I think kids are hoping when they're in high school and they're not doing great, they're not getting A's necessarily. They're like, what is there going to be for me? Well, a lot of times it ends up with people being business owners. It's not universally true, right? There's people who got A's that end up getting into owning businesses, but it's just an interesting factoid that there are people that aren't your traditionally high-performing student that end up owning businesses and are very successful as entrepreneurs.
I've met a lot of people that weren't super school focused that are smarter than me and some of the smartest people that I know. So I agree 100%.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing kind of your background, and I knew most of it, but thanks for telling me again.
Yes, sir. So let's talk about you.
I'm not as interesting. I don't have all the.
That is your opinion. Tell us where you hail from, and let's kind of go through the same steps.
Sure. So I'm from the East Coast. I am relatively new to the West Coast. I've only been here approximately 10 years. So I grew up in Connecticut, and similar upbringing to you, right? It was a small enough town. Ride your bike, come home when the street lights come on, and have a lot of good memories of hopping fences and playing wiffle ball with the neighborhood kids. So just that same small town feel, and sad that my kids don't get that same experience for a lot of different reasons. But it was a really good childhood. It was a good upbringing. So I really enjoy that part of my life.
Sounds like we need to get our kids out on their bikes. Okay, so East Coast, Connecticut. I mean, that's weird. What is that? Never heard of it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my wife, when she met me, she couldn't have pointed to where Connecticut was on a map when I was telling her I was from Connecticut.
Guilty.
So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's not one of those. It's not one of those states that most people have. You've heard of it, but like you don't necessarily. It's not relevant for most things. Connecticut's not known for a whole lot.
Also, like northern East Coast over there, there's a lot of stuff clumped together, so it'd be hard to.
Yeah, it's
now I'm sure I could pick it out, but
yeah, I mean it's. You tell people it's close-ish to New York City, a train ride in. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, I know where it is now.
Right. What about mom and dad?
Yeah, so my mom was into bookkeeping, so always as far as I knew, held that job and was very good at it, took her job very seriously. So if you ever been around bookkeepers and accountants, obviously you have now because we own a business, but they're very methodical what they do. They're very intentional with their efforts. It bothers them if things don't line up correctly. So my mom was very much that way, which I'm sure molded some of my personality and how I approach things.
Totally.
Fascination with numbers, that sort of thing. My dad, strangely enough, was I say strangely just because I'm not that way, but he is very mechanical. Always was working on cars. It could fix anything. Never saw like a handyman or a contractor in my house. I really don't think there ever was one growing up. And his main job was working at Sikorsky Aircraft. So he was a mechanic on helicopters. He was a crew chief at some point in his career. So did a lot of really cool stuff, just didn't really show me any of it. So I inherited zero mechanical inclinations. So that is not any part of who I am, which is probably why me and you make really good partners. So I think I grabbed more onto the numbers side, the financial side of things. I'm interested in all things mechanical. I just never really had a chance to exercise that early on.
Sometimes parents, don't show their kids something because they don't want them to, hey, I don't want you working on the house yourself or whatever, focus on academics or whatever. Sometimes that's the strategy. But your dad did teach you fishing, so you could have been a commercial fisherman.
Yeah, that probably would have gone well. I think there actually was a period of time in high school when I wasn't taking it super seriously, and the career advisor was like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, I'm really good at fishing." And they just looked at me with a long pause, like, "What else can you do?"
See, I was close.
Yeah.
All right, so you own a solar company now, but how did we get here? Like, did you go to college?
Yeah. So high school, I wouldn't say I was a good student or a bad student. I was kind of going through the motions, and I typically got A's and B's. School was relatively easy for me, but at a very young age, I was already questioning like when am I going to use this? Is this necessary? Is this really a life skill that I need to have at this exact moment? Like when is calculus going to be a necessary thing for my working career?
Still don't use that.
Yeah, never found a use for it. So I think that for me started really early. Just the questioning on what's important in life, how to prioritize my time. So got through high school, did good enough where, getting into the 4-year college I wanted was still very much possible with my grades, but by far was not, a straight A student. It was A's and B's. And then college, I went to University of Connecticut, which most people know at this point in time because of their basketball reputation, but in-state school, and had a good enough of an academic reputation where, parents were happy I was going there. Also, saved them some money in-state tuition. But so going into college, I didn't really have much of a plan, to be honest. It was more of I'll go in here and figure it out. I'll figure out what I want to do and plan to change my major a couple times. So getting into college, living on campus at a public university that had a pretty strong party reputation, it kind of swallowed me up. Like I definitely was way more into the social scene and becoming essentially an adult without parents around, where there's not rules and things that you have to abide by. So I'm sure I fell into all the traps, right? Staying up too late, missing classes, making decisions that my parents will never hear about, that sort of thing. So at some point, academics, were in focus for sure. But I would say that, again, that same mentality from high school of what's important right now. And I was able to grasp really early on that like forming myself as an adult and who I was and how I problem solve to me was immediately more important than going to like History 304, at 8 in the morning. So I didn't go, but you get my point, right? I spent a little bit of time entertaining being a physics major. I was immediately drawn to science, as I always have been. That's just been a pull even from high school.
I knew that. That's cool.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of the kids that were physics majors, and if they regretted it, and let's just say they looked 10 years older than the rest of the kids in the college. So I pivoted on that pretty quick and ended up in the environmental science realm. So, I say that it's like, oh, cool, you got into solar, and that all made sense. But when I went into it, I didn't know exactly what the plan was. I didn't know going into a version of environmental science was going to yield solar. It was just simply where my interests were at the time. But I was still very much so focused on all of the things that rounded me out as a person. So very much into the social development and my personal development and how I problem solved and prioritized and time management. And again, that's the same stuff I'll talk to my kid about. I probably won't tell them to do the same thing I did, but I will be very honest with them that, there are other aspects to school that are equally, if not more important than your grades that you get from those classes.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
So graduated and had my degree and, was happy with it, happy to be done with college. But then it was like, all right, real world, now what? Right? You went to a trade school, so you knew exactly what you were doing, and you knew you were skilled enough to get a job. I didn't.
Good point.
Yeah, so I'm looking in the phone book. There was phone books that year, and I called some solar companies because at the time, this would have been 2007. So I guess I knew about solar a few more years earlier than you, according to your retake of it. But
Yep.
I called a couple solar companies and just checked in, like, hey, are you hiring? And it just turned out that timing was perfect because the solar industry was starting to boom, and they basically needed people. So I walked right into an open door and told them about my degree, and they hired me. So that was the start of the solar journey. And I've been in it ever since.
Cool. So you start working for a solar company. This was in sales?
Yeah, so the position they hired me for was, back then, sales were a little different than they are now. When you think of solar sales, you're thinking of the guy that knocks on your door, the person that's essentially setting appointments or calling you when you don't want them to. My job was, these were early adopters, right? So we get a lot of people who are hippies with buses that want, or trailers that want solar on it, or just really granola crunchy people that are doing solar for like to save the planet. How many trees is this going to offset?
The early days.
The really early days. We weren't even talking about bill offset or payback periods. That was kind of rare-ish.
They were doing it for principle and not for
right. So I was having very long consultations. I was the one up on the roof, chalk lining and measuring everything, working with our early rudimentary design softwares, Google SketchUp and things to draw houses. It was
metric.
Right. I'm using solar pathfinders. I'm chalking out like the shade lines, and it was early, but it was fun. It was very much a consultation. I was a designer. I didn't feel like it was a sales role so much, but that's how I cut my teeth in the industry. I did that for 3 years and worked for a company that is still in business. That's pretty impressive. So
yes, it is.
Yeah. So I'm fortunate to have found that company and giving me the experience they did. And again, just a foot into the door, which is so important, right? Another thing I talk to my kid about all the time is just getting your foot in the door of that first company. That's really everything. School's great. The GPA is important and what it says on there, but getting into an established job and making a name for yourself and being able to put that in your resume, arguably more important, depending on what field you're in, of course. But
sure.
Like for me, that first job was more important than the degree and the GPA.
Okay. So you work for the solar company for 3 years. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, this is where the story gets a little interesting, I guess. So I have a tendency every couple years, 3-5 years, get bored. Don't worry. I know we're approaching that, but this doesn't apply anymore. I'm a little bit more invested by owning the business. I had a tendency to kind of get bored. And at that particular job, I was looking for more opportunity. I was looking for expansion of the company where I could help them develop more business in different states. New York, I believe, was the objective at that time. And basically the owner just decided that's not what I want to do. I want to keep it small. So just kind of reached a point where I was like, all right, I think this might be the end of the journey here. I took a big risk by going outside of the solar industry a little bit. It's a parallel industry. I had a contact that introduced me to a company called CED, Consolidated Electrical Distributors. They're essentially an electrical wholesaler. So think like Home Depot or Lowe's, except privately owned and
electrical specific.
Right, electrical specific. So I hadn't heard of them at the time, but I looked them up and I was like, wow, this is like a $5 billion company and they have 500 plus locations. Sure, let's go talk to them. And I spun the interview very quickly into not them asking me, do I want to sell electrical parts for them, but let me build a solar division for you. Even then I was probably disproportionately confident in myself, whether I deserved to be that way or not. I told them, let me build a solar division for you, or some version of that question, because there is opportunity, right? I work for a contractor and we're buying our products from Texas and California. Again, this is shipping to the East Coast, Connecticut. How insanely inefficient and inexpensive is that? So it was pitching them on building something that didn't really exist. And I was told no, essentially, that they've tried it and it didn't work. And they weren't convinced that it's a good spend of the money. So, all right. And I decided anyways to still I guess this was the risk, take a flyer on the job. I accepted the job to be in sales for them, not focused on solar specifically, but more just in general. So I kept that job and sold lighting and switchgear and different various electrical things that they currently are specialized in. All the meanwhile, I still in the back of my mind, I'm going to spin this back to solar. So I ended up just kind of calling on solar contractors and asked them, do you have a need? How much do you buy? Like, what can we stock for you? Would it make a difference? And essentially brought the business back to CED and showed them like, hey, look, there's opportunity. And do you want me to take this order or not? And of course, right, they're a business that is trying to make money. So we started the solar journey. So that's how CED on the East Coast first got into solar. And obviously, you know the story, but CED has evolved from being an electrical distributor that was, $5-ish billion. It's, I don't know if anyone knows the exact number because it's a privately held company. They don't share the financials very often.
But it's big.
But at this point, from the point that I joined, it has grown to be worth billions, just the solar side itself. And the amount of locations that were solar specific went from 0 to 100. So I fast forwarded through that pretty quick, but essentially I was given the opportunity, good timing. Again, I've been fortunate with good timing throughout my career to help CED grow into having a solar division. And I was instrumental in starting some of the initial growth in some different states besides Connecticut. Connecticut had 3 locations. We opened up a Mass in New York, and it just kept spreading. So that was kind of my breakthrough. The first job was how I cut my teeth, but getting that's everyone's dream, right? To get a job where you're getting in at the ground floor when something's being built, because all the opportunities there. I was given the ability to be in meetings with foreign manufacturers negotiating, multi-million-dollar deals that like normally a 23-year-old wouldn't be able to. And I was given the keys to build something and develop something that didn't exist. Again, not something you typically get. So very fortunate to have had that opportunity, and I think I made the most of it. And I worked at CD on the East Coast until 2015.
Okay, so in 2015, you came here, right? I'm leading you, sorry, but like I know the story, so it's hard for me to drive or to not drive. But,
yeah, essentially, there's a girl there, right? There usually is, and I was at a work conference in California, and we were coming out here, and essentially. This timeline overlaps a little bit. So this was pre-2015. I moved in 2015. Sure. But I was out for a conference for solar and essentially stayed at a hotel right near the convention center in Anaheim. And I met my now wife, who was the concierge at a, I don't know if I said the hotel name already, but one of the hotels right by the convention center. So that's how it started. That's how we met. She moved to Connecticut for a period of time. I thought I was the greatest salesman in the world because I made a California girl move to Connecticut, and then she moved me back to California. So willingly did so, moved near family. It was a great decision. Otherwise, obviously, when you'd be here right now, wouldn't have all the things that we have.
Yeah, I'm just like, we've talked about like this a lot, but I'm linking like our wives as like the jumping off point for us knowing each other. And even though like they didn't know each other, but they were like the catalyst, me getting into solar, you coming to California. We have our wives to thank. Love you. So that's cool. So you meet the girl, get married, 2015, you move back to California, new job.
My company transferred me, so CD Green Tech transferred me to their West Coast location in Riverside. There was plenty of locations at that stage in 2015. Riverside was one of the larger ones, doing the same thing I was doing on the East Coast with a little bit less responsibility. It was more of a sales role. So that's really, once I got here, right, Southern California is like the mecca for solar. So I can't remember the exact number, but hundreds of contractors were being managed and supplied materials through this location. So that's what gave me the insight into this industry, the players that are driving growth, that are meaningful to manufacturers. And honestly, that's where most of my interest came from, because I spent most of my time working with these contractors on solutions, right? If you're in sales, you can keep it simple, or you can go a little deeper and try to figure out how can I help this very smart business owner do even better at his business by giving him some helpful suggestions along the way and maybe giving him insights to things that maybe he doesn't see from his seat every day. So that's what interested me more, just getting to know contractors, getting to know their businesses, seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly, and trying to help them. And I loved it. That was a lot of fun for me, essentially being a business consultant that they didn't ask for, but it was fun. And a lot of times I got to watch them follow some of the advice I'd give, and I'd watch that business, succeed. I don't want to take credit for it. Those guys were very good at what they did, but like it was fun watching some of those concepts prove to be fruitful. So it didn't take long, of course, that 3 to 5 year itch where, again, all the stages last 3 to 5 years where I kind of got to a place of, I think I could do this myself. I think I can take the advice that I'm giving. I can take the knowledge base that I've formed and I can apply it and own my own business and be successful at doing this. Because solar, as much as it's been around, I mean, people have been doing solar since like the 80s or prior to that. But yeah. Real solar, as far as everyone's concerned in track homes, is more of like the last 20 years.
Sure. Yeah.
So solar been around for a while, but it was still very new. So I was excited to the prospect of being an owner when there's still so much development, so much industry progress to be had. So I guess this is where our part of the story syncs up, right? And you know it, but essentially working at CD in Riverside, that's how I met you. I was working with New Day Solar to supply them products.
We were one of the contractors that benefited from some of your guidance. Like you were saying, you're super knowledgeable and had a lot of experience in that side of the business. So I was doing the purchasing for New Day, which is how we got connected. And I'm going to insert my perspective here, but fast friends, you're a likable guy. And we had a lot of, similar interests. And so it was really easy to hang out, have a beer, and talk about solar or not.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't see you as a business partner though, right? I didn't see you immediately. And we're like, when I met my wife, sure. I was like, that's going to be my wife. I was pretty sure. But like when I met you, I was like, that's a guy I'll have a beer with. And I still want to have a beer with you. But this is a little bit of a surprise to be sitting here doing a podcast with you, talking about our experience and how we got to be owners of New Day.
Yeah, interesting.
But I think we're very yin and yang, right? We say that a lot, but you have this strong pull towards mechanical, wanting to understand how things work, and then being able to protect a company from all the liabilities and potential issues customers may have, right? Which is just a great skill set. And then I'm much more in strategy and numbers and the financials. That's just what draws me in. So people warn you all the time, right? Going into business with a partner that, are you sure? Like it usually doesn't work. Like you're never going to see eye to eye. We're 4 years into owning the business together, but I think this has worked so well because our skill sets are so different and we complement each other. I think we genuinely trust each other to do that side of the business well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate the trust and like the levity that I have to, do some of the projects that like I'm interested in. I had a realization, you're the not self-proclaimed. I call you the numbers guy a lot. But I'm the nerd in the relationship.
I call you the nerd.
Yeah, you call me the nerd all the time, but how's the numbers guy not the nerd? I'm the contractor, but I mean, I will be the self-proclaimed nerd. I really like, talking about electrical and trying to find solutions to complicated projects. So
all right, well, now that they got the long-winded backstory for who we are, I guess knowing that, right, I just thought it was important for people to understand who we are, how we got here, because I don't think we're the typical path, and I think me and you think very differently than a lot of other business owners, and something that is really important to me that I have learned over the course of school and the multiple jobs and now owning New Day is don't be afraid to think differently, right? I think of it all the time, like how can I be a contrarian in the environment we're in, because so many people think the same. This isn't solar specific. This could be talk about any topic, right? Like people tend to think the same. And if you do that, then you're probably just going to get similar results. So it's something that's really inspired me to think differently. And I think that's a huge part of what makes New Day who they are, because we don't approach things in the typical way. We're not just thinking about how do we grow a company? How do we make the most amount of money possible? Me and you line up really well and have prioritized for the first 4 years of owning this business on how do we take care of customers? How do we stay in business long term? How do we provide the thing that most companies don't, which alarmingly is providing good service and just making sure the customer is happy and wants to refer you at the end of the day. It's extremely uncommon. So we lined up on that, and it cost us some growth and cost us some profits, but in the end, I don't think we would change anything. So that is so centralized to our philosophy.
Yeah, and then that brings us to the podcast, right? Why are we doing this? we're so focused on customer service and trying to build a responsible contracting business and installing solar. So what do we have to say? Well, there's a lot to the solar industry that people don't understand or don't know. Like they're flooded with marketing and door knockers and their Edison bills in their face monthly. And so their friends are telling them, oh, you got to get a solar from this guy or that guy or whatever. There's so much that consumers don't know about that goes into this. And it's not as easy as everybody makes it out to be. And there are a lot of considerations that you need to make. So responsibly,
right.
We're trying to bring some of that behind the closed doors information to the consumers.
Yeah, I think all solar companies sound the same, right? At some point, it's just it's on repeat. You're hearing their message, you're seeing their coupons.
Quality, integrity, customer service, right? You
free
say that about
solar,
every business. Oh, free solar.
It's
yeah,
all the
sure.
same. And at some point, let's be honest, you're not even hearing it. It's just white noise. So what we're trying to do, first of all, this podcast is not New Day Solar, right? We're the owners of New Day Solar. This is SpeakEasy with Eric and Cory. So the intent here is we might talk about solar. We're going to go into the weeds on topics that most companies don't want to talk about because we believe that that's a service that's needed. Let's get through some of the misinformation. But really, this isn't just about solar, right? We want to have guests on here where we're talking to people from other industries, other people being used in the local market that we're also in, and let's give them a chance to explain their story and let them peel back the curtain a little bit and expose some things in their industry. So I'm excited just to make this fun and interesting, and hopefully you're hearing a perspective that most people don't want to talk about because it's not one that necessarily makes you money or grows your business. It's just one that it's just factual. It's just what's happening and what do we deal with in our jobs.
It's missing. It's not out there. Like if this information isn't easy to find. Talk about the negatives in your industry. Everybody wants to put forward the positives and hide all the negatives, but it almost feels like that's what people need to know. Like I need to know the negatives. How can this go bad for me? Let's leave the positives for after I understand, the dangers.
Yeah, I agree. So I think the place we're in solar is there's a lack of trust. It's not just solar, right? It extends to so many things happening in this country right now. People don't believe facts that they're hearing. They don't know who to trust for information. So I think part of getting over that is admitting our industry is flawed. And there are a lot of things happening which should give people pause for having a solar project happen at their house. But hopefully by us just being honest and exposing some truth on it, it helps. And that's the goal, at least, to get people a little bit more educated, feel a little bit more comfortable. And that starts with being honest.
It's an amazing new concept. Never heard of that. Honesty. Just kidding.
Well, we'll see. So again, hopefully we didn't bore you with just giving our bios, but wanted you to get a little idea of who we are and where we came from. But we plan to have episodes that are going to give you some insight. And if you have any topics that you'd like to hear from, send them our way, and maybe it'll be a future podcast. So thanks for joining us on SpeakEasy with Eric and Cory.